There are some reports of HappyModel transmitters burning up at 1 watt output power, and one of the reasons might be high SWR. Standing wave ratio is a proxymetric of how much power is being reflected back into the transmitter. An SWR of 1 or 1 to 1 to be precise is an ideal match, with all the power being either radiated into an electromagnetic field or dissipated as heat in the antenna and the cables, but not reflected back into the transmitter. An SWR of 2 to 1 is usually considered on the edge of acceptable for anything capable of sufficient power output. Usually it's about 5 watts and more, but due to lack of any cooling in the transmitter module, 1 watt in combination with high SWR might cook the output amplifier. For example, an SWR of 2 to 1 results in 11% of power being reflected into the amplifier where dissipated heat. An SWR of 3 to 1 means 25% of power is reflected. So I decided to check the antenna that came with the transmitter, and I found its SWR quite poor, somewhere around 2 to 1, but sometimes as high as 3 to 1. By the way, SWR depends not only on antenna construction and materials, but also on its position relative to conductive objects in its vicinity. Anything hygroscopic, such as wood, would also affect it. Compare this to a folded dipole I made for a long-range Yagi antenna. I've just cut it to length and attached it to a 3D printed frame. I haven't even trimmed it. This dipole is perfectly usable as a standalone omnidirectional antenna, and it has an SWR of 1.2 to 1, on average 1.2 to 1.3, which has a very good value corresponding to 0.2% to 1.7% of reflected power. This means that there's 20 times less additional energy dissipated as heat in the output amplifier compared to a HappyModel antenna. Once I get a second transmitter, I'll try to test it at 1 watt output power, but in conclusion, just don't use the antenna you get from HappyModel. Those are not tuned well and have pretty high SWR.